The results are in, but the results are not yet in, and it isn't over yet. I'm referring to the election held in Israel earlier this week, which Ido explained to us and elucidated some of what's about to happen. So while it's clear that Likud, the party led by Benjamin Netanyahu, received the most votes, and that he will be tasked with forming a new government, what is not yet clear is who he will ask to join his coalition. And he actually has a number of different options. The fact that he has not yet revealed what he plans to do hasn't prevented various media outlets from expressing opinions, with some of them schreien Gewalt. The rush to judgment portrays the results as a threat to democracy. Yesterday's Washington Post lead editorial was entitled, quote, "Israel takes a troubling turn toward illiberal democracy." Writing in the New York Times, frequent Israel critic Thomas Friedman, whose predictions are rarely, if ever, correct, wrote a column called "The Israel We Knew Is Gone." And some American Jewish organizations have also expressed similar concerns about the results and its possible implications. Now, not to minimize the gravity or legitimacy of the situation and the concern, part of it stems from uncertainty about what the new government will look like and which parties will become a part of the coalition, including who will be in the government and what role will be played by those parties who represent extreme views which may be uncomfortable, anathema, and inconsistent with one's Jewish values. When presented with such a consistent critique and narrative, American Jews may assume that Israel has chosen a path that we're not supposed to like. And perhaps that may be right, but many may assume that this is the perspective and narrative that we are to absorb and accept. What we sometimes forget is that the thing about democracy is, and it can be hard to accept, sometimes the side that we back and that we want to win loses and doesn't win. Indeed, democracy can be disappointing and it can be messy, which is why Winston Churchill famously said, "Democracy is the worst form of government except for all others." Recognizing that there may be justification for concerns about the nationalist views expressed by the rise of Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir and their party, Jonathan Tobin wrote reassuredly in JNS the other day, quote, "Zionism and Jewish nationalism are not antithetical to democracy. On the contrary," he writes, "they are an expression of a basic democratic value that prizes the right to self-determinations by all peoples, including Jews." Now, one of the reasons for concerns about the new government is, as I alluded to, is whether it's going to take a turn to the hard right, fueled by statements by someone like Avi Maoz, who is a member of the Knesset and head of the anti-LGBTQ Noam faction in religious Zionism. He said he would work to legally abolish an annual gay pride parade in Jerusalem. And another concern, to be frank and honest, is discomfort with Netanyahu. It's significant to know that Netanyahu was widely quoted in the Israeli press just the very next day after these statements by Maoz. Netanyahu was quoted as saying that his government will not allow any changes to the status quo regarding LGBTQ rights in the country, including limitations on gay pride parades. I want to share another interesting story with you about Netanyahu, because so often he is portrayed in a way in which he seems to be a very hardliner on so many issues. Now, as many of you may know, I was in Israel the week before last, where the outgoing Assistant Attorney General told a fascinating story of something that had happened about a year earlier during the war with Gaza. Without going into details of the specifics of the particular planned operation, he relayed a proposed action that military leaders had wanted to undertake and had recommended. And although the generals were unanimous in all feeling it was a necessary operation, when asked his opinion, which is the way in which it's done in Israel, he said it should not be undertaken. He said it violates international law and did not conform to Israel's code of military conduct. The generals in the meeting all objected. They continued to press their case, But the Attorney General held his ground and explained that on legal grounds, the operation should not be executed. After a somewhat tense standoff, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, who it was implied was initially inclined to go along with the military's recommendation, said, quote, "We've heard the opinion of the Attorney General. He says we cannot carry it out. The discussion is over. It's been decided. Let's move on to the next matter." A number of people have asked me this week what I think about the results of the Israeli election, and in part because I know it isn't over until it's over and we actually know what that government will look like. I've replied with what admittedly is somewhat of a non-committal answer. I have said the people have spoken. Now, I say this also because I have confidence in the elected officials to act responsively, and because I respect and accept the democratic will of the people, even when it may disappoint or not conform to my personal opinions. I subscribe to the advice of Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, who I also met with just last week, who said to the people of Israel prior to the election, quote, "Exercising our right to vote is the most prominent expression of democracy in its simplest and most necessary sense. We must not forget, even for a moment, those who think differently from us are not our enemies. Those who support a party that represents views and opinions we disagree with are not traitors, nor are they fifth columnists. Disagreements are and will always be an integral part of the democratic landscape." And to the American Jewish community, just a day before the election, President Herzog addressed American Jews, and he said the following, quote, "The results may or may not be to your liking, but the vote of the Israeli people should be respected. To each and every one of you in the American Jewish community, I say that the firm, vital connection between the State of Israel and North American Jewry will not and should not and cannot and must not be compromised, regardless of the results," end quote. Well, this week, we've read the Torah portion about the beginning of the Jewish people, the beginning of Jewish history itself, with God's call to Abraham. Abraham was called Ivri, meaning the Hebrew. But Ivri also means that he was on the other side, that he was willing to stand against prevailing positions of all those who are around him. He was willing to take a stand against idolatry, against paganism, against Mesopotamia. And God then told him to go to the land of Israel, for that is where his destiny will be fulfilled, and that is where his people will become a nation. And so that journey continues, and we are part of that journey. We hope and pray that as Abraham was able to withstand forces in order to do what was right, so too may the people of Israel continue to do the right thing, and may we stand with them, and let us say, Amen.